up to now, what we essentially have been discussing are the several things, but the key things that we've been discussing in the last 6 weeks is what can we know about the nature of the Ribono Shel Olam. It's a difficult question and so on, and I don't say, the point of the shir is not what is the nature of the Ribono Shel Olam. I don't say what can we know about the nature of the Ribono Shel Olam. That's a very different type of question. Okay, and we've gone into that at length, and I think we have a fairly good understanding of what we can know and why we cannot go further. I hope to, in the near future, maybe in a couple of weeks, to give a review share, I think, of all the things again in that perspective. But I'm not going to go into that, okay? That's number one. Number two, we've also attempted to discuss what is the nature, why did the Ribono Shel Olam create the Bria? Why did he create what we see in front of us, or reality? Number three, we discussed what is the central beings in reality, and we spoke about the concept of a self, what fundamentally what the Ribono Shel Olam attempted to do to Mekayim his Ratzon V'Heitiv, and we spoke about the self, some of the characteristics of a self. We spoke about the concept of will, how a self relates to willing and to doing. You see, and the difference between a self, a regular self, a neshama, let's say, and the Ribono Shel Olam. We spoke about that. And then finally we spoke about the critical problem that exists in the Bria, which is what's called the Chson of Nam D'Ksufa. And we discussed where we thought where the origin of this problem is, of Nam D'Ksufa. And we also discussed how that Chson of Nam D'Ksufa can be fixed, rectified, which is the tikkun of Nam D'Ksufa. And we saw that the whole process of Nam D'Ksufa, the Chson of Nam D'Ksufa, leads us to the notion of din, or mishpat. Now, does everyone understand what I'm talking about? You know what Nam D'Ksufa was? Okay, it's a very critical thing, and I'm not going to go into the reasoning. Nam D'Ksufa simply means that when the Ribono Shel Olam created the neshama, which has self-awareness, basically the problem was that the neshama itself, or the person, whatever that neshama is, cannot take the hatov of the Ribono Shel Olam without earning it or working for it. It must earn it itself. It cannot do anything. It cannot take it. It can receive it, but if it receives it, it not only gets pleasure from it, which is tahatova, but it also gets pain. You see. So since the Ribono Shel Olam gives b'shleimus, when he's noisin b'shleimus, obviously, I mean, it's not very much of a process of hatova if he's giving the hatova to something, and that thing is experiencing pain from it. The chson and the shleimus of his giving. So therefore, he had to create a system where the neshama, the being, must earn its hatava. It has to earn it. And this is the problem of Nam D'Ksufa. Nama means bread, Ksufa means busha. And the concept is mentioned in the Zohar, it's mentioned in Yerushalmi, I think. I don't remember clearly if it's mentioned in Bavli anywhere. I was always amazed why such a central concept is not mentioned much more. Very few people ever heard of the words, and so on. And most people think the problem is what a number of people have said here is that, well, the Ribono Shel Olam wants everyone to work for his Olam Haba, because when you work for it, you appreciate it. That's extremely oversimplification of what it is. I mean, the shaila is why you have to appreciate something you worked for. I mean, it begs the question. And that's what we went into last time. That there's a certain Matthias, because of the neshama itself, because it is a self, in that sense it's somewhat separate from the Ribono Shel Olam. Ideas is that the ideas are experiential in nature, they're not so much cognitive. What I mean is that sometimes you understand something. But the problem with a lot of these ideas is that these ideas have to be just more than understood, that if you understand them, they filter down into you, because they're very subtle. And this is the thing, so it's sometimes it's possible to understand this stuff and not understand it. You know when you've understood what's going on here, when you really feel what I'm talking about, when you feel the concept that the Ribono Shel Olam is existing, when you understand the concept that a self is truly separate, you see. When you understand these very distinct concepts, you begin to feel what I'm talking about. So sometimes you have to listen to it, then it's suggestible to get the tapes. I'd like to construct a system where we can have a master set of tapes, and they can be duplicated, and we'll just, just give it out to the, to the ilm here, so they can catch it. Each one will have his own set of tapes to review it. It is very important, and I cannot overemphasize and so on. And, I'll be very honest with you. All of you do come to the shul. Some people have come from the beginning, some people have just come on and so on. But let's face it, Torah is no less choshev than anything you have pursued, any chokhmah or any profession you will have pursued. If you really want to know it, you must study it, which means that you must devote some time to it. These shurim, all of these shurim, contain many subtle ideas, and like I say, they're progressive. It is extremely important, very advantageous, very important for you to review the tapes periodically and take notes on them, so that you don't always have to review the tapes. But it's good for all of you to review all the tapes again and take your own personal set of notes, so that when you want, you can review the notes. Because by the time we're finished with the overview, you will have a complete set of notes about the entire course, basically, of Hashkafa. So it would be a very valuable enterprise. The tackle to a shir is not to come and be entertained, which is many times what it is. We come to a shir, you shmooze, you sit there, you shmooze, okay, you go, get up, and you go out, and that's the end of it. Or it's an instant set of ideas, it's fascinating and so on, you pick yourself up, and that's the end of it. If you really want to have an effect on you, you've got to study it. You have to see it in its entirety. You have to know it, and you have to chazer it. It's very simple to chazer, because it's really klolim, it's not many details. There aren't many details. There are only certain key central concepts. And you can chazer the entire thing in 10 minutes. Once you understand it, it should take you no longer than 10 minutes to go over it. 10 to 15 minutes, which is strange, that's all it is. But that key chazor will put you in touch with all the major ideas and their interconnections. And that's very important, because as we add a new idea each week, we connect it to the old ideas. And if you do it this way, if you're systematic about it and you're somewhat studious, I can guarantee you that in a specific period of time, 3 months, 6 months, you will have a complete structure in front of you. And once you finish this, there will be almost no problem in Hashkafa that you will meet, that you may not be able to answer it, but you will not instinctively know where it fits in the Hashkafa system, and basically know how to begin to deal with it. Even if you don't know the answer, it doesn't matter. And what I mean is, I don't care what medrash they throw at you. They throw at you a medrash, any agarta. You will be able to handle any one of them, given this entire framework, because you will know where it fits into the entire conceptual framework. And I say this, it sounds like a really broad statement, sweeping statement, but I think it's, you will experience it yourself. You will have that kind of control. Today, what I'd like to speak about is a very difficult topic, and so on. And what I'd like to speak about today is trying to understand what is involved in this topic. And what it has to do with is an aspect of the Ribono Shel Olam. It's an old problem that has been presented by many philosophers, and I believe that, I don't remember, but I think Rabbi Kiva mentioned it in Pirkei Avos. It's the old question of Yediyah and Bechira. A Bechira means free will, and Yediyah, the Ribono Shel Olam's knowledge of what you're going to do. It's an old problem. Has been discussed by many people and so on. I am not going to tend to give an answer here, but again, what is our derech, we will try and understand the problem minutely, what it is, and whether or not such an answer is possible to know. Like if it's north of the border or south of the border, where does it belong? It's interesting. I saw a very fascinating Ramchal, Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, the other week, which I was very happy to see it, because it's Megala, a lot of some very important things, but Ramchal says something very interesting. He says, he's talking about Kabbalah. I saw one of his phone. He's talking about Kabbalah, and Kabbalah, of course, is, we won't go into it. We don't really take much from it. But whether you know it or not, the system that we are introducing here is structurally more inclusive than Kabbalah. I don't know if you know that, because what we're dealing with here is the Nimshal, and it's more inclusive. Kabbalah itself is included into the thing itself. But he's talking about Kabbalah, and he's talking about the notion of the spheres. And I don't know if you know what spheres are. There are certain, what I'm defining them, there are certain creative vehicles which the Ribono Shel Olam he created them essentially, and he created 10 of them. The 10 spheres. I'm sure everyone must have heard of the 10 spheres. I mean, almost any guy on the street knows about the 10 spheres, because there's so many books in English about Kabbalah. It's for the public. So, the beginning of all creation were these 10 spheres, and they're called by different names. Keser, Chochmah, Bina, Hoid, a bunch of them, Tferes, Gvur, a whole bunch of them. And essentially, the Buddhism created the whole world through the 10 spheres. So the Ramchal says something really fascinating. He says the following. He says that everything that mankind is shaykh to know, you see, we could know everything up to the 10 spheres, you see. But if you would ask the question, why are there 10 spheres? Or why these are the 10? He said you cannot go beyond that question. He said, why? Because the knowledge of the 10 spheres is a knowledge of the beginning of the Bnei Hashem's activity, or Ratzon, his will. You see, to begin to question why these 10, and why 10 in the first place, is to begin to examine his Ratzon itself, his thinking process, he's saying. And what he's saying is that we cannot go beyond that. He said, even though there's a reason for it, there's a tam, there's a reason, but we cannot examine beyond that, because the goal now is to go into his Ratzon itself, how he thinks. Whatever he thinks, how the Bnei Hashem thinks stuff. So this cannot be known. Which I found an interesting thing. So, because, what the Ramchal is again saying, the concept of north of the border and south of the border, anything which is, there's, from the Ein Sof, anything which involves the Bnei Hashem himself, before he made anything, is called the Ein Sof, or the Bnei Hashem Ba'atzmusar, in his essence. Everything after that, which he created, is called Ritzoinoi, his will. Means his meisim, his activities. And the Ramchal says, Moshe Chaim says specifically, we cannot understand his Ritzoinoi, the nature of his Ratzon. We're not talking about the consequence of his Ratzon, but the nature of Ratzon, and surely we cannot understand Atzmas of the Bnei Hashem itself. So, I just found that thing. But there's everyone understands what I'm saying. That's a push-up shot, but there's even, I think, a more profound idea in what he's saying. Is that he's saying that even Ratzon itself subscribes to a certain aspect of logic, whatever it is, because he's saying that even though there is a tam, a reason, we cannot know the reason. What he's saying is that the creation of the 10 spheres, the specific number and the specific type, is subject to a certain causation or logical system. You see, which means that the Bnei Hashem's Ratzon itself runs in a certain sense. Not Ba'atzmusai, but the Ratzon itself runs in that kind of system, which is a fascinating thing, because to those things, it means reduction. It's a very interesting thing, because it means that there's a shaykh, a level of hasod zichud even on top of that. But that's already something else. Can't go into that. You won't understand that. Anyway, this is the thing. So today we're going to try and discuss the Indian of Yediyah and Bechira. Now, there's the old question that everyone asks. If the Bnei Hashem, and we're going to first give the simplified version of this question. A lot of people ask the question, many people ask this question, 1 minute, they say, the Bnei Hashem knows the future, yes? Yes. How do you know he knows the future? How do we know the Bnei Hashem knows the future? How do we know that?
He is the future.
No, I don't know what that means. What do you mean? He doesn't create the future.
He's controlling everything.
So how do we know he knows the future?
He knows what he's going to do.
He knows what he's going to do, but it isn't.
Because if he doesn't know, it's the Chazara.
No, what do you see in Chazal, in Medrash or Chazal, that the Bnei Hashem knows the future? There are Medrashim that's there. Do you remember any place like that?
That's how you know.
Now, one of the most simple things. What do you see in Chazal? I mean, it's often, what? Nevi'us. Nevi'us is another thing. All the Nevi'us is a stuffing, Charlotte there on Nevi'us. But
he showed Moshe Rabbeinu.
Who? Yeah, right.
He showed Moshe Rabbeinu what's going on.
Yeah, Nevi'us is not so pashut. Nevi'us is not so pashut.
The gave away 70 years because he saw the generation of the Hamelech.
He saw the the famous thing, right? So you see clearly the Bnei Hashem knows the future. I mean, and he showed them people Benevius what he gave Benevius. They also know the future. Although truth of the matter, you can get around the thing with Nevius is not necessarily knowledge of the future, really. And we'll get into that later on. But the point is that you see the Baruch Hashem knows the future because he told Adam reaching he called Adoris. He showed Moshe Rabbeinu what's going to be the slave. He showed him Rabbi Akiva, and he was jealous of Rabbi Akiva. He says Ma zu Torah zu Chor and so on. Yeah. Oh, they did?
Not today.
How much?
Oh,
So you see the Baruch Hashem knows the future. So the Baruch Hashem knows the future, fine. So if he knows the future, if he knows, for example, if one of us, let's say there's a guy Reuven. He knows that a guy Reuven is going to do a sin. Let's say he knows, the Baruch Hashem knows that in 20 minutes from now, Reuven is going to do a sin. Right? That's the Baruch Hashem's da'af. Very nice. Now, Reuven has bechira. That's what the tikkun of Nam Tzufa is. Person must have. He has to earn it on his own. You see.
Okay.
Well, Hakol b'dei Shemayim chutz mi Yirei Shemayim. Mamash chutz means that Yirei Shemayim, or the will of yes, no, in this direction, is totally dependent on the person, not on the Baruch Hashem. So the shayla is, the fact that the Baruch Hashem knows that Reuven is going to sin 20 minutes from now, does that in some way infringe on his bechira?
No.
Why not?
Because Hakol b'dei Shemayim chutz mi Yirei Shemayim. But he knows.
Yeah, that's a statement. So,
but he knows what he's going to do.
Well, doesn't that
mean he determines what he's going to do.
That's right.
Oh, so knowledge is not necessarily determination, right? Fine. Knowledge is not necessarily determination. That's what he's saying. That's the chilek. Just because you know something doesn't mean it determines it. It's not causative. Right. There's an old Meister, an instant Meister. I don't know if this is true. I just heard a very interesting tale of Rav Yonason Eibschitz. You all heard of Rav Yonason Eibschitz? Rav Yonason. And he lived in the time of the Gra, in the 18th century, in the 1700s, and he was a Modik Ilui Shekab. And once a king came over to him and said, man has free will. How do I know man has free will? He says, I see that the Baruch Hashem knows what man is going to do, so how does it take from that free will? So Samson says, what does that have to do with it? But the Baruch Hashem knows what the Baruch Hashem knows. What man wants to do, what man wants to do. So he says, I don't understand. If he knows about it, it means he's got to do what he knows.
Why?
In a sense, we'll examine this. If he knows that this is what's going to be, then this is what's going to be. So then how is it,
Right.
He only knows it because he looks into the future and he saw it. That's what he decided to do.
So the Yonason said that's not true. He said, I'll give you an example. So he said, let's go. He said, here. There's a house over here, and it's got 4 doors on all 4 sides. So he said like this. I want you to go into that house, and I want you to come out through one of the 4 doors. And don't tell me which one you're going to come out of. Okay. But I will predict which door you're going to come out of. You see, and I will write it down on a piece of paper, and I will seal it in an envelope. And we'll see. Okay, so the king said, fine. He goes into the house, and the Yonason actually goes away, on the guard, naturally. He goes away. He writes it down, everything is sealed and delivered. It's sealed. So the king goes looks at the 4 doors, and says, which door can I go to now? He says, I know. Forget about the doors, I'm going to bust the wall down. So he breaks the wall down and he goes out. So he comes out to Rav Yonason Eibschitz and says, no, I came out. So Rav Yonason said, what do you call it? Which way you went through? So he said, I didn't go through the door, so I broke down the wall. So Rav Yonason says, very interesting. Okay, open up the letter. They open up the letter and said in the letter, Melech Peretz Geder V'Hoilech. He breaks down the fences and just goes out. Now, so what Rav Yonason basically was saying is that the fact what you do has nothing to do with what I know. Right? That's the answer to that question, right? No, it's not. The question is much more profound. First of all, we have to ask ourselves the following thing. How does the Baruch Hashem know the future? There's the fact that we see, first of all, that he knows the future. How does he know the future? He may say, well, he's God. Yeah, but we'll see where he's the Baruch Hashem, that's true. You see, but there's not magic here. There's not magic here. When we say that the Baruch Hashem knows the future, how does he know?
Because to him it isn't the future.
He created Hagas and Mishpat, and he knows how it's going to go.
Wait 1 second. It's beyond time. This event can't be beyond time, and this is what we have to examine more closely. First of all, the way it really it would appear to be is the Baruch Hashem, how he knows the future is very interesting, but there's no way that we can know how he knows the future. Why? We know that the mitzvahs of the Baruch Hashem, his existence is not in time. He does not exist in time. When he created this reality, which are beings, which possess existence, that's what we are. It's what we're called contingent beings. The Baruch Hashem is what's called a necessary being. He exists because he is existence itself. That is his essence. He is being. So therefore he must be. our essence is not our existence. We don't have to be at all. So that when you combine the essence and existence, we are. That's called contingent being. We're contingent. We depend. He's necessary. He must be. That's a technical language for what it's called. The Rambam calls it what's called mechuyev hametzius. Mishnah Torah, Shedi Torah.
He's our life support system.
Who?
The Rebbeinu Shalom.
Yeah, but we call it necessary. But it's just necessarily. He must be, because he is existence itself. Okay. Now we know that he does not exist in time. We exist in time. What does it mean that we exist in time? What does that mean? We exist in time.
Our existence is quantifiable in terms of time.
It's quantifiable, but our existence has what's called duration and so on. Now, the future, right? Does the future exist?
Not to our perception, it doesn't.
Huh?
To us, it doesn't.
Because it doesn't. Does it exist at all?
Well,
To the Rebbeinu Shalom?
there's no such thing as future.
I mean,
Okay. So let me add a point here. There's a critical concept of Bechira that's called the direction of Hashpah. Now, when the Rebbeinu Shalom does something, what it means is that he's mashpia. That's what it means. He's called a mashpia. What happens is that when he created the world, and everything that goes on in the world, except for free will, is called hashpah milamayla lamata. Do you understand that? Means that he is the stimulus, everything else is the response. It starts with him, right? Everything in the universe is that way. It's his hashpah. It means milamala lamata, except for one thing. What is that? What? Yeah. So how characterize it in the same phrase? That is a hashpah milamata l'mayla. What does that mean? It means that the hashpah, or the origin of the action, starts here. You see, it starts with us, in our will, and the effects generated outwardly into the Bria.
The origin of our response.
Yeah. The origin of our, the origin of, the response, the origin of the activity starts with you, or the person, and the consequence is there. So the hashpah goes in two directions. Now, in everything, in all creation, every hashpah exists milamala lamata, except in man. Because man has bechira, so it goes the other way. This is not true of any being in creation. There is no being that has every being in creation, every metzias, every entity, does not make an iota of a hashpah. Cannot. It has no shaykh to this. You see, it is a pure receptacle that goes for gashmis, it goes for malochim, everything. A malach cannot do a thing. He has no shaykh to hashpah. He sits there and he's makabel hashpah. And when the hashpah comes down, it tells him what to do. It makes him, it tells him what to do, everything. You know what I mean? He has no shaykh to anything. The only one who has a shaykh to hashpah going the other way is mankind, is the human being. What? Because he has free will. When the Buddha says, I give you will, you yourself, so you have will, but I make that will free so that you can choose in whatever direction you want. You see? That means that I have to wait for you. That's what the Buddha says. I have to wait for you. You have to tell me what to do. You see? In everything else in the Bria, the Buddha tells everyone else what to do. You see? That's a very strange concept. In the case of Bechira, what it means is the Buddha must wait for us.
The response.
But he cannot do a thing as such. He must wait for you. You see? Now when we say you have free will, that's true free will. Free will means that it is not pressured or motivated by anything outside of you. It comes purely from you. It comes from the self. So in that sense, it's separate from the Bnei Shalom. You see what I'm saying? Just like awareness, the ability of awareness is separate from him because it's aware of him as an object. The will or the activation of that self in a certain direction, which is Bechira, is also separate from him. So the Bnei Shalom basically cannot know what you're about to do. Because by definition, he cannot predict what you're about to do. Because since that which you're about to do is totally in you, it's outside of him. So then how can he know this information?
Because as he knows it, it's already done.
So therefore, no, wait a minute. You understand what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. He cannot know this information. If we say if free will is totally in you, it's your thing, it's not his thing, which means that it has an aspect of separateness from him. It's chutz. It is hakum b'tei shemayim, chutz m'yeshamayim. That chutz is literal. Chutz means it's not in the hands of shemayim. When it means it's not in their hands, it's not in their control. It means that existentially or in being, it's outside of the Baruch Hashem's being. You see, that's what it means. That's what it means. That's how it could be chutz from him. So if it's outside his being, you see, the Baruch Hashem cannot put his finger on it. You see what I'm saying? So this has to do, boils down to the question that we asked last week, the week before. It's a question: how could the Baruch Hashem be an Einoid Mavadoi? There's nothing but him, and there could be a self, which is something outside of him. It's not the same thing. It really boils down to the same thing. So the question is, how could there be something which is free and yet connected to him in some way? Okay, we relegate that akasha to the archives of the unknown. We're not going to deal with that. Okay? But I want you to understand what Bechira means. You must understand, Bechira means that the Baruch Hashem is Yoshev, sits and waits for you to tell him what he should do. That's what it is. Okay. Now, what does it mean, existence in time? What does existence in time mean? Existence in time means the following. The future. What future? There's something called the present. The present is the here and now. That here and now is an instant long, and that's it. Right? Mm-hmm. If the present is determined by free will, you see, then it cannot be known 5 minutes from now what that free will will be doing, really, in any way. Because the hashpor, which is supposed to emanate from that free will, doesn't exist yet. You see what I'm saying? So that shows me that the future does not exist. The future would only exist, in a sense, not really, but if the whole hashpor of the Bria came from the Baruch Hashem, so he knows what he wants to do, so he knows the future because he knows what his plan is. You see, but he doesn't know the future because he sees a reality. There is no reality now. You see what I'm saying? There is no reality now, so he doesn't know the future. If he knew the future, because he controlled all the hashpor, so obviously he knows the future because it's his plan. But if part of that plan is not his, it's yours, you see. And what you have to do has not been done yet. Where did he get this idea from? And the truth of the matter is, there is no such thing as the future. Your future really doesn't exist. I don't know if you realize it. You know what people think of time? The Baruch Hashem created the Bria to exist in time. This pencil exists in time. You know what that means? That means that the existence of this pencil is now. 1 second from now, in the future, this pencil doesn't exist. Existence itself is being carried through time. That's what it means. You see what I'm saying? Most people think that time is like a road, you see, and you got a truck on the road, and that the truck is going on the road. But there's something called time. The road is there, except that the truck hasn't reached the part of the road. That's not what time is. The truck isn't on the road. What time means is that the truck, as it's going along, it creates the road while it's moving. Exactly, like a paintbrush, you see, which means that the future doesn't exist yet. As existence goes on, you see, as time goes, existence goes, you see. Do you understand what I'm saying? There is no future, there's no existence yet. 5 minutes from now doesn't exist in being.
But what about the past?
What?
Oh,
also does not exist. It does, its effects exist. Yeah. But the event doesn't exist anymore either. The only thing that exists is the here and now. Now, this instant now is what exists. Nothing else exists. That's what it means that existence is in time. You see what I'm saying? That's what existence in time means. It doesn't mean that existence passes through time, where time is like a road, you know, that there's something called time and existence passes through it. No. Existence and time are going on at the same thing. That things exist now. You know, what it means is the following. Time is the following. Existence. Each existence, there's a chiddush. You see? You see what I'm saying? Every second is this chadshus of being. Because no second determines the next being necessarily. So therefore what we see is the amazing thing. Again, how does the Rebbeinu Shalom know the future? You see, if there's nothing in the future, what is he seeing? Just say there, what is he looking at?
But if he doesn't have time, what is it? All actions are happening.
No, what we simply know is the following. The Rebbeinu Shalom, obviously, the Rebbeinu Shalom's existence is not now. You see, we don't understand that. We cannot know that. You see, here's another way to understand the difference between the Rebbeinu Shalom and us. He does not exist in time, which means that his existence is not tied up with a now. You see? His existence it's not tied up in time. So it is existence. So in some way it always is and always was. In some way it has a permanence, an absolute quality about it. It doesn't have duration. To have duration means is for being or existence. To kind of move along. You see, what moves along, existence doesn't move in time, but rather existence moves with time. You see. Do you mean? Because as time is going, existence is moving with it. Does everyone, do you understand what I'm saying? The marshal,